Welcome to the station, Kentucky's conservative outpost. This is the anchor show for Kentucky's Voice, the only statewide conservative media outlet in the Commonwealth, offering news and analysis from a conservative Christian point of view. My name is Jim Waters, and I thank you for joining us today. Coming up on the show, Dr. Lance Pearson, director of the Kentucky Liberty Caucus, will be here to update us on what's happening in the General Assembly and his work in analyzing our legislation from a conservative perspective. The General Assembly now in its second month, and we'll be joined in the second half of the show today by Vladimir Aguilar, who's a great Cuban patriot in our community. You don't want to miss that conversation as well, right here on the station. All right, well, we're joined by Dr. Lance Pearson today. And Dr. Pearson, thank you for taking time. I know this is a particularly busy time for you with the General Assembly going on. You are not only the director of the Kentucky Liberty Caucus, but you lead the Kentucky Legislative Action Committee, a group of citizen volunteers. And I just really found out more about this. I'm really impressed with the work you're doing here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. But your committee, tell us what the committee does. I know they really do kind of a detailed review of most of the bills that are filed. And, you know, most citizens, Dr. Pearson, are so busy, trying to pay the bills and take care of the family, get to the sports events and everything, that they're not really paying that close of attention. So I think this is a really valuable work you're doing. How do you think this helps people in the Commonwealth?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. This group, which we're calling KYLAC, Kentucky Legislative Action Committee, really grew out of the Oldham County GOP. About 3 years ago, Oldham County GOP decided to form a standing legislative committee that would basically report back to the GOP meeting what was going on with the legislature. And in order to have a good sense of what was happening in the legislature, we basically got together a few passionate citizens, most of whom are not lawyers, that basically decided to read through the most important bills, form assessments, and report back to that group. Yeah. Over the last 3 years, that's really expanded. Last year, there were somewhere around 1,070 bills filed. We managed to review about 600 of them. This year, we've grown even more, and we have people involved really from all of the collar counties, including Jefferson County and the Louisville area. And I expect that we'll read somewhere around 80% of the bills. So yeah. I think there'll be about 1,100 bills this session. We expect to review at least about 800 of those. Yeah, one thing I want to point out is it isn't just us that are busy, it's the legislators. Yeah. And so we saw that there was a real gap where at the federal level, a legislator typically has a staff of 5 full-time employees. Here in the legislature at the state of Kentucky, it's a part-time legislature that is in session for roughly 3 months a year, and they share one secretary among 4 or 5 of them. So it's just not realistic that any one legislator is going to read every bill, and we decided, why don't we crowdsource that, have conservative citizens offer their evaluations to just basically assist our legislators in what should be their priorities as they head into the session. Yeah, I know we hear from legislators too, rank and file legislators primarily that, hey, there are things in these bills that we don't even know about, and we're being asked to vote on them. So I think there's a lot of value in this service, for that purpose as well, especially when you get down toward the end of the session and bills get filed and there's not a lot of time to read a large bill, and things can get snuck in there, as you and I know, that may not be for the best. I don't think most people realize how many bills we're going to have. Over 1,000 pieces of legislation filed, and yet when you look at what actually passes, Lance, it's not many of them. Talk for a moment about how a bill gets done here and how it kind of gets a fast track. Of course, we know in our legislature here, the way they've been operating is the bills with single digit numbers or maybe 1 through 10 really have the higher priority, and I guess those are the ones that get the most focus. But how does that work with so many bills? That's right. I think in a typical session, there's probably somewhere between 250 to 350 bills that get through, but some of those bills are renaming a post office, something like that.
Yeah.
So really, both chambers, both the Senate and the House, they choose their leadership, which consists in both houses of 5 Republicans and 3 Democrats. And whichever side has the majority, they get the majority of members on those leadership groups. And so basically, those leadership groups tend to set the priorities and control the flow of legislation through the process.
Yeah.
So the bills that get prioritized by leadership over really since the end of last session, they've been working on developing a lot of these bills. And so the bills that are very high priority by both chambers, they tend to get single digit numbers like HB1 through HB9 or SB1 through SB9.
Yeah, let's talk about a couple of those right now. Of course, this is a budget session, and with the Republicans and supermajority, they really do set the agenda for the session, which bills are going to be really get the fast track outside of course, the primary constitutional duty, really the only constitutional duty specified for legislators is to pass a balanced budget. During this session, we've really got 2 major bills on this: House Bill 1, House Bill 6. One bill, number 1, really talks about one-time expenditures, and then House Bill 6 is the budget. And, you know, we could get down into the weeds on this, but Dr. Pearson, just kind of from a high point of view, why should people care about this? Why should the people of Kentucky, why should taxpayers and voters care about what's happening with the budget? It's a huge issue.
Well, our group, we don't typically focus on the budget. Just for reference, the budget bill this year is over 230 pages, and it really isn't written in a way that's very easy to penetrate for your average citizen.
Yeah.
But the reason that you should care about the budget is somewhere around 10 or 11 billion dollars of your tax money over the next 2 years is being allocated. So if you care about your pocketbook, you should care about this. In particular, a couple of sessions ago, the Republicans passed a bill that set up automatic qualifiers for reductions in income taxes. If the incoming revenue versus the outflowing revenue and the rainy day fund, which we'll talk about in a second, if those are at certain levels, it enables the General Assembly to pass a reduction of 0.5% or even 1% in your income tax. And the way that the budget's designed this year, it seems that they are tailoring. They have the idea in mind that they're going to drop the income tax from 4% currently down to 3.5% starting in 2026.
Yeah.
That's a lot. You can see it in the way that they've written this budget, that's what they have planned.
Well, that has to do with spending, right? So when they get spending more under control, there's a better chance that citizens can keep more of their money. As you mentioned, the more that's spent, the less there is in the private sector, the less there is in our pocketbooks to invest in the way we choose to do. And I think citizens know better than government how to invest their own dollars. You know?
That's right. I would say, and the Republican legislature has done far better than their Democrat predecessors.
Right.
The Republicans only took over control of the House of Representatives in Kentucky in 2016 during the Trump wave. Now the Republicans control over 80% of legislators in both chambers. So they really do. If the Republicans want something to get through this legislature, the governor really has no say on it, and the governor has really no power over the budget.
Well, let's talk about a couple other things. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I would say, and so one indication of how much better they have been at managing the budget is our rainy day fund currently is at around $3.6 billion that we have in reserves. And after this next tax filing season, I think it's projected that we may have as much as $5.1 billion pending these expenditures.
And you know the reason that
very good job. Republicans have done a very good job of managing our fiscal responsibility.
Yeah, and the reason that matters too is if we have another COVID or a downturn or something happens like that, another tornado, another flood, we've got funds on hand to address that without raising taxes or taking money away from other services.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Let's talk about a couple of the other bills in this top 10 since we just.
defend democracy.
Misinformation poses a threat to our nation's health.
Climate change is an emergency.
Democratic socialism.
Codify women's right to choose.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15.
Let's talk about a couple of the other bills in this top 10 since we just have a few minutes here. We never have enough time on this, but let's talk about a couple other bills. One is House Bill 5, Dr. Pearson. It's a crime bill. And since this program is really dominant here in Louisville and focused on Louisville a lot, there is a concern about crime and the increase of crime here. And I think the Louisville Legislative Caucus is really, wants to get something done about this. They filed House Bill 5. Give us just a really quick overview of what that bill is, and it's a big bill. It's got a lot of parts.
That's right. It's what we call an omnibus bill. They've basically put everything in the kitchen sink related to crime and criminal penalties for especially violent felonies. They stuck those all into one bill. So my personal opinion, this should have been at least 6 separate bills so that we could deal with each of these topics individually. But with that said, this has really been driven by the Louisville caucus, of which there's a surprising number of Republicans in the legislature on both sides. It's called the Safer Kentucky Act. And what it does is it increases the penalty for violent felonies, if that was the one sentence summary of what the bill does. But it touches on a lot of areas. There are urban homelessness regulations. There are expansion of what we call shopkeepers' prerogative. One of the more controversial measures is what they would call a 3 strikes law. Now, a 3 strikes law in many other states means any 3 felonies in a row gets an extremely severe punishment. This only applies to violent felonies, but it does say if a person has committed 3 violent felonies that he has been convicted for, that person will spend the rest of their lives in prison without the possibility of parole. So it's basically a crackdown, and it says, you've been given many opportunities to live peacefully in society, and you have failed multiple times, and so we just have to get you away from the rest of the citizens.
More than one chance. We've got a clip from Representative Josh Callaway on this bill. Can we play that right now? And he made a statement on the House floor about House Bill 5 and a strong statement, if we can have that.
And Kentucky deserves safety in their communities, and they deserve to be protected from the most violent among us. Through the transitional living home that I have the privilege to direct, every day of my life is put in to actually helping the most needy among us. And I believe that while I strive to help the most needy among us, that I can also help deal with the most violent among us. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So great balance there, right? You can be tough on crime, but also help those in need who are, especially with addiction. I think we're seeing a lot of criminal activity because of addiction, but that's a different thing than a violent offender who's given more than one opportunity, 2 opportunities, as a matter of fact, and then still doesn't respond to that. Like you said, I think that's an issue. I think that's right. And let me just say that Josh Callaway is among the best of our legislators of violent criminals. Well said. Well, Dr. Pearson, thank you for taking a few minutes to join with us. If people want to get on your list of and they can, you have an email, you have quite an email list of and you update that regularly with what's going on legislatively, and folks can stay updated. I think that's a pretty good way. Am I describing that correctly? And how can people get involved?
Right. Yeah. We actually publish our evaluations online. If you want to go to the website KY Liberty Caucus, and that's CAUCUS.com, just right under the bottom, there's a list for 2024 legislative reviews. And so if you want to really focus on the first few bills from the House and then scroll down and look at those first few bills for the Senate, it'll give you a good sense of what the priorities this session are for the Republicans.
Exactly. And House Bill 2, of course, the school choice bill, we've talked about that before. We'll talk about that more in the future. Dr. Pearson, would love to have you come back on a regular basis.
We are here to defend democracy.
Misinformation poses a threat to our nation's health.
Climate change is an emergency.
Democratic socialism.
Codify women's right to choose.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15.
Having a new friend of mine I just met on with us today. His name is Vladimir Aguilar. And Vladimir, welcome. You are a representative for sure of the Cuban community here in Louisville. And I am just excited about what I'm finding out here about what's happening with the growth of the Cuban community here in Louisville. So welcome to the station today, and just look forward to working with you beginning now. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the chance to be here on your show, and thank you for having me here.
So behind you, we have two flags. We've got the American flag, and it's the it's the Cuban flag. Am I saying that right? Or tell us about that. I love the mixture there. That's great.
Well, this is my little studio. I have a live show like on YouTube. I got my YouTube channel, The Cuban Show.
Yeah.
I do like a live show like Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, like 11 a.m. It's most for the Cuban community, you know, talking about the issues that should worry about politics and everything here in the state of Kentucky. Those flags in the back. I will always say, like, I'm Cuban by birth. I'm born Cuban, of course, but I'm American for choice, by choice.
By choice. I love
choose to be American.
I love it.
You know?
I love it. Hey, how can folks watch that show? Or tell us again, is it live on YouTube? Folks can watch that?
Yes, it's a YouTube channel. You can search The Cuban Show. I mean, it's easy. I'm Cuban and I'm making a show. So I do a live stream Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 11 a.m.
11 a.m. Let's catch that, and we want to get your show on here as part of our network of programs. But let's talk for a minute about the growth of the Cuban community. You and I talked briefly about this, but tell us what's happened here. I don't think most Americans know what's happened here in terms of the significant growth of the Cuban community, and why do you think that's happened, and how much has it grown? What are the numbers looking like right now? What can you tell us?
Well, first thing, I'll say the main reason and the only reason, in my opinion, why Cubans are like growing up, not only in Louisville, Kentucky, there are other states like Florida, Miami is I would say like the most biggest population for Cubans in United States. But the only reason for this is because we don't have freedom in Cuba. And what I mean freedom in any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I guess, and a lot of, I mean, the numbers here in Louisville, we talked about that. And what are we at? 40 to 50,000 Cubans community here, and it's growing.
Well, I would like to be conservative on the number, but I'll say around like 40,000 Cubans. Only in the last 2 years, there were like close to 15,000 Cubans who arrived to Louisville, Kentucky, or Kentucky in general. And we are going surrounding those numbers.
Yeah. Any particular reason, before we get into some of the bigger issues here, but any particular reason you think, is Louisville a particular destination for Cubans, or is it just somewhere they're ending up just wanting to come to this country, or how's that work?
Well, first, it's kind of like, complicated because there's too many factors that I can bring people over here. The most that I know is like people have some relative here in Kentucky already, and obviously they bring their relative over here because, despite like Kentucky's cold state and all of that, some people prefer the Miami hot weather, but like the economy down there is not that pushing like here in Kentucky, so there's more jobs, and obviously, people like to come over here.
Well, as you look, Vladimir, at what's happening on our border here with so many undocumented, unprocessed, unknown migrants crossing into this country, illegals, let's just say it the way it is, illegal, from other countries, what as a Cuban American and really someone who loves this country and cares about what's happening here, what concerns you about this? Where do you start with this?
Well, first thing, it's like when there's no like control on the borders, or like when there's no immigration without integration, in my opinion, that's invasion. That's the first thing. And I want to be real clear about this. And probably people will, call this like racist or whatever. I don't pay attention to those things. But I'm an immigrant who came to this country like 9 years ago. I made my whole process to come over here, and I have to follow all the laws, because when you enter in someone's house, you have to follow those rules, And the main thing that I'm seeing over here with this illegal immigration, there's no control. Of course, on the Cuban side, I kind of speak like there's a bunch of Cubans, good people, who, are seeking the same thing I'm seeking in this country, like freedom and having like prosperity and a good life. But between those peoples, among those peoples, there's only like, there's also like, I'll say like bad people. Yeah. What kind of bad people we talking about? It's like,
they don't care about the freedom. They don't care about, they want to come and hurt our country.
And especially the Cuban regime in the last few years has been sending, a few of their agents to United States. Most of those agents are like opinion agents. So right now we're facing like a issue in the Cuban exile, seeing people who wants to make business with the dictatorship and advocating for the dictatorship. We got the example of ex-congressman Joe Garcia, who is in Miami right now. This guy is going down there to the dictatorship to, make business with the same dictators who 2 years ago sent people to the streets to kill Cubans. Yeah. So that's the main issue I think we're facing right now with this open borders crisis.
So talk about, you mentioned the freedom, that's why you came here. That's what you were in search of. What is it that Americans need to know about what's happening in Cuba, and what should we, and the difference? We hear a lot of young people here praising socialism and praising the ideas. and not to be disrespectful, but they really don't know what they're talking about, do they? They have not experienced what you have. What would you say to a young person here who thinks and has this kind of nostalgic or idealistic view of socialism and wants to put down our country for our freedom and prosperity? How do you talk to those people?
Well, first thing I want to let you know, that's the work of those agents. There is a lot of like Cubans agents, opinion agents on the universities here in United States, joining groups like, People's Forum, which are like a left radical organization, and they trying to sell that, dream about the socialist Cuba and all of that. And for the young people, my message is like, don't take things for granted, because the only reason why more than 3 million of Cubans left Cuba in the 65 years of dictatorship we have in Cuba is because those dreams they trying to sell you right now. Here, we got the privilege to speak out. We have the privilege to a simple thing like having like a hot water in a shower tub. That's a luxury back in Cuba. And that's how the real socialism works.
Yeah.
In the words, it sounds like pretty nice, but in reality, there is not a single country in the whole humankind history that socialism has worked.